mental wellness.
Good morning, Access. Happy Sunday. I am so happy to be with you today, speaking in this mental wellness series. Listen, I have enjoyed this series so much personally. If you've enjoyed it, throw up some hearts right now, show some love. It has been so instrumental for me. I've just enjoyed so many aspects of it. And Pastor Jason's been doing such an incredible job. Listen, if you've missed any of the messages from this series, you can always go online and find the old messages, listen to those. Believe me, it will not be a waste of your time. You will enjoy that. Well, today I'm here to do like a little bit of soul confiding with you. I'm going to admit some things and tell you some of my deep fears and traumas. I'm praying and believing that you all will be kind enough to not use this against me. But I'll just go ahead and say it. I hate frogs. Frogs. I hate frogs. I am petrified of frogs. I have been known to call my husband home from work if a frog gets in the house. I've called neighbors over. I have grabbed my children in a protective and life-saving manner and carried them upstairs and remained upstairs if there was a frog downstairs. I don't exactly know how to explain it other than when I see a frog, I essentially get cold all over and part of me dies. And it took me a minute as I was thinking about why do I hate frogs? Why am I so scared of frogs? Because, you know, I grew up on the Muppet Babies. I grew up on the Muppets in general. I love Kermit. He's a nice felt frog. But for some reason, frogs now and live frogs just are probably my number one phobia, okay? I think I pinpointed it to two events in my life, two places where frogs really just made an impression. Number one, I was 18 years old and on a mission trip in Mexico. And a guy from our youth group thought it was so funny to grab the biggest bullfrog I had ever seen in my life. I mean, it was the size of a conservatively moderate dinner plate. And he brought this frog, all slimy, all limbs, all bulgy eyes. He brought this frog into the girls' dorm on our missions trip. I don't think I've ever recovered from that. Okay, the other incident is, and this leads to a second fear of mine, which is I don't trust door wreaths. The connection is that one time early in our marriage, I was outside and I was by the door wreath, and from the door wreath, one little demonic, slimy, wet frog jumped, and it landed on me. Landed on me. I just want to take a moment and let y'all sympathize with that. Ever since that incident, I have never trusted a door wreath. I change them seasonally. I'm not insane. I change them seasonally, but I make Jason do it because I believe that frogs are hiding in there to get me. In fact, there was a time when we were having a family from Access over for dinner, and they rang the doorbell. I opened the door to greet them. If you're watching now, by the way, shout out to y'all. I opened the door to greet them, and I looked, and there was a frog in the door wreath. I kid you not. I screamed, and I slammed the door shut in their face. Didn't let them in. They didn't know what had just happened. So this poor, perplexed family is on the other side of the door. Just like, hey, Liz, is everything okay in there? I don't like frogs. Do you have a fear, irrational like that? Let us know in the comments. Might be roaches for you, snakes, door wreaths, very common ones. But I don't like frogs. In fact, I'm so traumatized by frogs that I can't see them on TV, nothing. If we're at the zoo, we're walking past them, okay? That's kind of a funnier phobia. By the way, I know some of you are watching this right now going, it's gonna be so funny, I'm gonna show her a house with frogs. Don't do that. Don't do that. Send flowers, not frogs. Don't send frogs, don't do that. I don't want them. I don't want them. Well, that's like a funnier trauma or fear that I have, but sort of a thing in my life that I look back on and I say, wow, this really affected me to where even now I'm still afraid of frogs. What's interesting though, being in ministry, one of the main things I hear and see when people come into my office to talk is past trauma and how that past trauma has affected them. And really what it boils down to is having past trauma and not being able to reconcile that with God. Where was God? How could God allow this? People, bottom line, just have this idea that something bad happened to their past, and how could God be in that? And truthfully, the point is this: past trauma has caused many of us to be stuck. Well, what do I mean? Well, a lot of times you've faced a past trauma. I mean, it could be abuse, physical, mental, verbal. It could be a divorce you went through, whether your own divorce or watching your parents get divorced. It could be an illness you had. It could be money stress. You grew up poor, so you're kind of marked by that now. But the point is that you've never really fully been able to get past that. And we're stuck because of some past trauma in our lives. Today, I want to bring good news. The good news is the fact that we serve a God who's a God that heals. I think a lot of people know that. They believe in that. They've heard of Jesus who did healing miracles, right? He would make blind people see and make lame people walk, make deaf people hear. But I love that we serve a God who was just as intentional about healing the whole person and making them well, mind, body, and soul, as he was about just their physical bodies being healed. I want to read you guys a story today found in Luke 8. I actually picked the Message translation to read from. I just love the way Eugene Peterson words all of this, but this story is found in multiple accounts in the Gospels. It's a story of one of Jesus's many miracles of healing, but it goes a little deeper than that. Let me read it for you. In the crowd that day, there was a woman who for 12 years had been afflicted with hemorrhages. She had spent every penny she had on doctors, but not one had been able to help her. She slipped in from behind and touched the edge of Jesus's robe. At that very moment, her hemorrhaging stopped. Jesus said, "Who touched me?" When no one stepped forward, Peter said, "But Master, we've got crowds of people on our hands. Dozens have touched you." Jesus insisted, "Someone touched me. I felt power discharging from me." When the woman realized that she couldn't remain hidden, she knelt trembling before him. In front of all the people, she blurted out her story, why she touched him, and how at that same moment, she was healed. Jesus said, "Daughter, you took a risk trusting me, and now you're healed and whole. Live well, live blessed." Healed and whole. What does that mean? Let me give you a little backstory on what hemorrhaging would have meant to this woman in her day and age. This woman didn't just have a medical ailment she could hide. This woman having an ailment of hemorrhaging meant that she was considered in her culture ceremonially unclean. Not just unclean, but no one could touch her because she was unclean, or they would become unclean. In fact, if she touched a chair, it became unclean, and then no one could sit in it. Imagine how hopeless. Imagine how alone. When you read up on the story, it says she had tried everything, spent every penny she has. Certain scholars that I read from said that she would have tried in her time as many as 11 different methods to stop this hemorrhaging. 12 years. Imagine not being able to be hugged for 12 years. Imagine not being able to feel the embrace of someone you love for 12 years. How alone, how isolated. The bottom line is, she was broken. And she wasn't just broken physically, she was broken mentally, emotionally. Imagine going through all that and losing hope. You see, I think that the woman's brokenness brought her shame. What kind of shame would you have to feel to know that you are unclean, that where you go, people look at you and say, "You're unclean"? I think her brokenness had isolated her. She couldn't even hug a loved one. She was, by all accounts, alone, probably thought, "I'm the only one who's gone through this." And her brokenness had stolen her hope. She, it says, had tried everything. She was at the end of her rope. I mean, how desperate did she have to feel to go in a place where she knows there's crowds and crowds of people And she's going to be looked upon as unclean, and she's still so desperate that she reaches out to touch Jesus and become well. What I love about Jesus is he knew all of this about her story, and he takes the time to flip the script on her. He takes the things that she brings, her shame, her isolation, and her lack of hope, and he flips it all on her when he talks to her. So first of all, Jesus says to her, "You took a risk." See, brokenness brought her shame, but Jesus called her brave. I don't know what you've gone through, but I know that in life, when we're hurt, we lose trust. So it may have been a trauma, an abuse, and we're hurt. So we've lost trust in people because people have hurt us. It may have been a divorce, so we've lost trust in love because we think, well, that doesn't work out. It may have been an illness, so we lose trust in that everything's always going to be okay because we know it's not. But whatever it is, when we're hurt, we lose trust, and Jesus knew that. Why would he take the time? This was just a physical healing, right? Why would he take the time to say to her, wow, it took a lot of trust for you to reach out to me? That's because Jesus knew this healing would need to be deeper than just physical. So this woman had shame, but Jesus called her brave. Brokenness had isolated this woman, but Jesus called her daughter. Imagine the joy that would have overwhelmed her when, after being alone and being the last person anyone wants to hang out with, be with, or touch, Jesus, the first thing he says to her is, daughter. Daughter. How many of us home watching this right now would say, it's been a while since someone has called me in love, since someone has called me in a way of family, and yet Jesus is calling out to us today, saying, daughter, son, you're brave. You can be healed. And see, where brokenness had stolen her hope, Jesus called her healed and whole. Healed and whole. You know, this woman had tried everything, it says. Have you tried everything in your life to get through a past trauma and it's just not worked? Have you tried numbing yourself with alcohol and drugs? Have you tried flitting around from relationship to relationship? Have you tried ignoring it? Have you tried working through it? And none of it seems to work. And yet Jesus is like, you've tried everything. I'm still the answer. I love that about Jesus. I love how we come to him and we're like, God, I need you to do A, B, or C. And he's thinking, I have thoughts and limitless possibilities you don't even know about. And I am able to make you healed and whole. Can you admit today that maybe, just maybe, you've been a little afraid to trust God? Some of you are looking at me like, how could you even say that? Don't say that. He might hear you. Well, spoiler alert, God knows you. He formed you. He knows what you're thinking. Some of us picked up the idea somewhere along the way that it was not okay to voice any sort of dissension against the Lord. And I'm not encouraging screaming at God and calling him names, but I am encouraging sometimes being real with your feelings and saying, God, I don't understand, and I have lost trust in you because you let this happen. I don't think it's sacrilegious. I think it's honest. I think it's gut level, and I think it's the only way we're going to heal, is to sometimes flat out admit, God, I don't understand you, and my trust has been broken. Long-term trauma for me is everything on the surface looks like I should be better, but I'm not. Long-term trauma is, this happened to me, it's not happening to me anymore, but why do I still feel it so much? Why do I still get so angry about it? Why is it still affecting my day-to-day? That to me is long-term trauma, when what's inside doesn't match what we have on the outside. You know, maybe nobody knows looking at you what you're going through on the inside. I can say for a fact that that's been the case for me. I mentioned frogs as one of my traumas and my distrust of door wreaths as a result. But can I tell you something a little more deep that I struggle with? I have a real fear and trauma and trigger when it comes to going to the doctor. I don't like even going for my kids' checkups. I don't like going if I have a cold. I don't like going even just for a normal standard visit. I get nervous, my stomach gets upset. They're taking my blood pressure going, whoa, your heart sounds like a full-fledged drumline. I had cancer when I was 23, a lot of you know. And I think just because of that, I know what it's like to sit in a doctor's office and get bad news. So I still go. I think it's important to go and get checked out and be a proponent of your health. I know that early detection is key for everything. But I can't say it doesn't fill me with fear when I go. And I remember when I was first coming out of cancer, they made me every few months go for like a scan, sometimes a CAT scan, sometimes a PET scan. And that was to make sure the cancer was still gone, that I was still in remission. I remember one such scan. I mean, these things were just set up for failure because first of all, for a PET scan, they're telling you the day before you can't have sugar. Well, that's strike one. Now you're on my bad side, okay? They would say, you can have a steak for dinner, and if you need dessert, have a piece of salami. Excuse me? Last time I checked, salami, not a dessert. Anyway, you'd go in the next day, you'd have to get up early in the morning, they'd make you go through this process of drinking this drink, and then they'd lay you on a cold table. And a PET scan is looking for sugars in your body, especially with those of us who've had cancer before. They're saying, well, if there's sugar activity, maybe there's something growing, something that shouldn't be there, something alien. And I remember one of these scans, which always terrified me, I got a call and he said, your scan looks good, there's just these little things, and nobody likes to hear that. Nobody wants to hear that. He said, there's these little things, but he said, but you know what? They're just remnants of the cancer you had and the chemo you had. Remnants. I didn't know what that word meant at the time. It meant I was still cancer-free, but there was just activity, but it was a part of what had happened, not a part of something that was still happening in me. Kind of similarly, I have a scar on my chest from a port. A port is something they put in cancer patients so they don't have to destroy your veins accessing them. And I have a scar on my chest from that. I don't have the port anymore, but its scar is still there. How many of us, you, me, are carrying remnants from things that happened to us in the past that we've never reconciled still and we're stuck? Why would Jesus in this story point out to her things like, daughter, things like, you were brave, you trusted, things like you're healed and whole? Why would he do that? Well, I think the key is found in verse at the end. In fact, in the NIV version of this particular passage, I love the way it was worded because it says, a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, and this part, but no one could heal her. No one could heal her. Why did they mention that? Why did they set that up? I think that's important because Jesus healed her. He didn't just heal her, he made her whole. Some of what you're facing has not been fixed, no matter what you've tried. You exercise, you eat good, you try to be a good friend, you try to be in a better relationship, whatever it is, but you still have that past trauma and you're stuck. And I'm here to tell you today that God knows, he sees, and Jesus is the only answer for finding healing in your soul, not just for finding healing in your body, but for finding healing altogether. What Jesus wants for us is wholeness. And what is wholeness? Well, wholeness is being healed and being well. Being healed and being well. You can be past physically what you've gone through. You're not in abuse anymore. You're not in that divorce anymore. You're not sick anymore, and yet it feels as fresh on the inside as it ever was. Why? Because maybe you walked out of the situation and changed your circumstance. but inside, you never got healing and wholeness for your soul. And maybe you're like that woman, you've tried everything, and it says no one could heal her, but today, Jesus offers healing. More than just healing, he's offering you wholeness. Mind, body, and soul. Does that sound good? For me, that sounds great. I remember sitting on the bed with Jason one time, and I was going for one of these scans, and I was cancer-free. By all accounts, I had every reason to be happy. And yet, I was more trapped by fear and anxiety than ever. And he looked at me and he said, "You're not whole." I said, "I think that's it. My body's better. My hair is growing back. The port's out. I'm not having to stay in the hospital anymore. I don't get blood transfusions. But my peace is broken. My trust is broken. And my heart was still having a hard time trusting." Is that you today? Have you been stuck in past trauma? I want to invite you into wholeness that only Jesus can offer. Today, he reaches out to you. He says, "Daughter," he says, "Son," and he offers you healing and he offers you wholeness. The first step, though, is getting so desperate, coming to him, reaching out, saying, "Jesus, heal me." Not just heal me, not just heal my body, not just remove me from this bad situation, but now heal my remnants, heal my scars, heal the parts of me that no one else knows, because on the surface I'm okay. Whatever that is for you today, I'm gonna pray now and believe that God is gonna heal you and make you whole. Will you pray with me? Lord, I don't know who's watching, but I know you do. I know that today, many are watching this who on the surface look okay, and yet inside, they are everything but whole. They are everything but at peace. They are everything but free. And I know today, when no one else can help us, you can. You come to us and call us son or daughter when we've been isolated. You come to us and call us brave when we feel as if we have shame. You want that shame off of us. In Jesus' name, right now, I just pray shame has to go, because Jesus is reaching out and calling you brave. And above all, where we feel broken, where we feel lost for hope, you come in and you are hope. Hope that you have overcome anything we can face, past or present. I pray, God, that you would just inundate everyone watching with a sense of your peace, with a sense of your presence, knowing that today, tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that, and on, you are our hope. You are our wholeness. I thank you, God. I honor you for that. I pray right now for freedom from those watching, that shame would drop, that brokenness would drop, that isolation would stop, and we would reach out to you and find our healing and our wholeness today. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you guys so much for watching. I love you. I'm praying for you. We'll see you next week.
Thank you so much, Pastor Liz. It's so great knowing that Jesus not only wants us to be healed, but he wants us to be made whole. And maybe that spoke to you a lot today, and you want to take some next steps. You want to dive in deeper with what that means. Well, do me a favor and go to access.tv/info and click the Next Steps tab and find what your next step is in getting closer in your relationship with Jesus. Before we go, I want to remind you of one more thing, that in 2 weeks, we are regathering together again at Highland Park Church, and we are getting back together to worship and hear an amazing message from Pastor Jason. We'll have Access Kids and childcare for the entire family. It's going to be an amazing time, so do yourself a favor, put it in your calendar now to be there in 2 weeks. And if you're not comfortable being in person yet, we will have it on Access Facebook Live. It is going to be the best, so mark your calendars, November 1st at 6 p.m. Today has been such an amazing day. Thank you so much for joining us here online. We love you guys, and we will see you next weekend. See you later.